Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you real quick. See, a lot of y'all have been trained to think you got to stroke a man's ego 24/7 if you want him to love you. But let me tell you something. Sometimes the real power, the real magic is in doing the exact opposite. I'm not saying disrespect a man. I'm not saying degrade him. But what I am saying is this: when you stop playing small, when you stop tiptoeing around his pride, when you stop handing him applause for the bare minimum, oh, baby, you're going to see something shift. Men fall in love with a woman who makes them feel something they've never felt before, challenged, awakened, intrigued. And that feeling doesn't come from comfort. It comes from contrast. It comes from disruption. It comes from a shift in his rhythm, a break in his routine. A woman who walks in and refuses to do what every other woman has done. A woman who isn't auditioning for the role of good enough. She's already decided she is. And when a man meets that kind of energy, he doesn't forget it. That kind of energy hits different. That kind of energy shakes him up. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, but it's firm. It's grounded. It makes him second guess his patterns. He starts noticing how easy other women have been to read, to win over, to manipulate even. And then he looks at you, unbothered, radiant, unmoved. And that mystery starts building something inside him he can't shake off. Because men by nature are hunters. They like a challenge. They respect what they have to work for. And when everything comes too easily, they don't hold it tightly. They don't value it deeply. But the woman who doesn't flinch when he pulls back, the woman who doesn't beg when he goes quiet, the woman who doesn't fall apart when he acts cold, that woman becomes unforgettable. She becomes the standard he didn't even know he needed. And it's not about playing games. It's about being so secure in yourself that his attention is no longer your oxygen. You don't need to be the woman who's always available. Be the woman who's always intentional. You don't need to be the woman who texts first, who apologizes first, who bends first. Be the woman who makes him come correct. See, you hurt a man's ego not by being cruel, but by being unavailable to foolishness, by saying no without an explanation, by walking away without a meltdown, by smiling like his inconsistency didn't even touch your peace. That's how you confuse a man used to women needing him for validation. That's how you shake the ego of a man who thought he had you wrapped around his finger. And once that ego takes a hit, once he realizes he misjudged you, he starts leaning in. He starts questioning his moves. He starts asking himself, wait, who is she really? And that curiosity, that confusion, that's the seed of obsession. That's how deep love is born. A man's ego thrives on control, on certainty, on being the center of someone's universe. And when you take that away, not by force, but by focus, when you shift your energy back to yourself, your goals, your peace, your glow, that man will feel the imbalance. He will feel the vacuum where your attention used to be. He will feel the emptiness of a space he thought he could always fill with half effort and smooth words. Now suddenly his charm isn't enough. His silence doesn't scare you. His distance doesn't pull you closer. And that makes him panic. Not because he's losing power, but because he's losing access. And access to a woman who's rare is not something any man gives up easily. You don't have to yell, you don't have to explain. Just be a woman who is no longer impressed by surface level affection. Be a woman who makes his energy work for her energy. Be a woman who doesn't give softness to hardness. And that right there, that's how you hurt the ego. Not by doing too much, but by doing less. By no longer entertaining weak efforts. By refusing to react the way he expects. When he sees that you didn't chase him, when he sees that your life continued, When he sees you thriving without him, something shifts inside him. He starts feeling something he hasn't felt before. Regret, respect, realization. And that right there, that's where the love starts growing. You see, when you challenge a man, you awaken something primal. He can't ignore it. His ego may fight it at first. He might act colder. He might try to reverse the roles. But inside, he's thinking about you constantly. He's comparing every woman he meets to you. And no matter what they offer, it doesn't taste the same because they didn't make him grow. They didn't make him think. They didn't raise the bar. You did. You became the mirror that showed him who he really was and who he needed to become if he ever wanted to stand beside you again. Men fall for the woman who makes them uncomfortable in the best way. The woman who forces them to elevate. The woman who forces them to evaluate. The woman who holds up her boundaries like a queen holds her crown, not aggressively, just unapologetically. Because that kind of woman, she doesn't need to convince you to love her. Her presence alone demands that love rise to her level. And when a man sees that, when he feels his usual games don't work, that's when he loves you madly. Not because you chased him, but because you challenged him. Not because you praised him, but because you provoked growth in him. You became a storm he couldn't calm, a peace he couldn't control, a presence he couldn't replace. When you stop over-explaining yourself, when you stop lowering your standards to meet someone halfway, when you stop doing all the emotional labor just to be chosen, that's when his ego realizes he's losing something gold. And when he realizes he can't access you the way he used to, when he sees that his opinion no longer determines your mood, when he notices that you don't need him to feel whole, that bruises him in a way that turns into obsession, into pursuit, into love, that's finally ready to rise to your frequency because you became the one who didn't flatter his ego, you challenged it, and in doing so, you gave him the opportunity to fall in love, not with your dependency, but with your independence. Not with your vulnerability alone, but with your strength. Not with your need for him, but with your refusal to need anything less than he's capable of being. And that's the kind of woman a man never forgets. That's the kind of woman he'll love madly, completely, and relentlessly because she made him feel something no one else had the courage to ignite inside him. A bruised ego makes a man realize your value faster than constant validation ever will. Because when he's constantly being uplifted, constantly praised, constantly reassured by you, he starts to feel like there's no risk of losing you. And when a man feels no risk, he becomes careless, he becomes lazy, he becomes entitled. And the truth is, many women are taught to believe that if they just keep giving more love, more patience, more understanding, eventually he'll wake up and realize what he has. But no, that's not how most men operate because comfort makes a man complacent. And when you're always there, always supportive, always available, he doesn't question your presence. He expects it. And the minute a man starts expecting you instead of appreciating you, that's when the dynamic shifts. That's when you go from being a prize to a possession in his mind. And it's not that he doesn't love you, it's that he doesn't feel the urgency to show it anymore. But the moment his ego takes a hit, the moment you don't respond the way he expected, the moment you don't show up to validate him, something inside him clicks, something gets disturbed. And it's in that moment of silence, that moment of confusion, that moment of distance, when he starts replaying every conversation, every decision, every attitude he took for granted. And suddenly he's not so sure anymore. Suddenly he's wondering why your energy feels different, why your tone has shifted, why your absence feels louder than your presence ever did. And it hits him not because you told him directly, but because you took back the power he thought he had in his hands. And now his ego is bruised, And his mind is racing, and his heart is wondering if someone else has your attention, if someone else is receiving the energy he used to feel entitled to. Men don't wake up when you give them everything. They wake up when you take something back, not to punish them, but to protect yourself, not to manipulate them, but to remind them, because no man should be so secure in your love that he stops earning it. No man should be so confident in your loyalty that he forgets to reciprocate. And when you step back, when you detach, when you stop pouring and start preserving, that's when he sees the gap. That's when the silence becomes deafening. And that's when his ego begins to bleed just enough for his vision to clear. Because sometimes love gets lost in the noise, but respect is born in the quiet, in the absence, in the mystery. And let's be real, a man's ego can't stand the thought of being replaced, of being forgotten, of being unfazed. So when you don't call him back, when you don't double text, when you don't ask him what's wrong, he starts to spiral internally, trying to figure out where he lost his grip. And here's the key. He has to feel that shift organically, not because you yelled or begged or tried to force him to see your worth, but because you stopped filling in the gaps he left. And the moment he starts wondering why you're no longer trying to fix what he broke, that's the moment he realizes your silence is not a pause. It's a decision. It's a declaration. It's a message that says, I won't compete with your ego for space in this relationship. A bruised ego doesn't always mean drama. Sometimes it just means he finally sees you clearly, without the lens of convenience, without the illusion of control. He sees you as someone with standards, with boundaries, with dignity, and that makes him rethink everything. That makes him regret the shortcuts he took, the times he showed up halfway and expected you to do the rest. And it's humbling for a man to realize that the woman he assumed would never leave is the one who no longer checks for him, no longer explains herself, no longer stays up waiting for his change, and that bruise to the ego. It's the beginning of transformation. If he's the right kind of man, it'll make him reflect. It'll make him grow. It'll make him chase you, not because he's afraid of losing, but because he finally understands what he's losing. And the truth is, some men need to lose access to you to understand the value of you. Some men need to feel what it's like not to be the center of your attention, to finally grasp how much they benefited from your presence. And when that reality sets in, when that ego starts to deflate, they begin to love not from entitlement, but from awareness, from reverence, from gratitude. Because now they're loving the whole of you, not just the parts that serve them. And sometimes that bruise is the very thing that breaks the shell around their heart, that opens them up to love you deeper, louder, and more intentionally than ever before. You're not breaking his spirit by stepping back. You're awakening his perspective. You're forcing him to see the cracks he ignored, the patterns he justified, and the effort he withheld. And if he truly cares, if he's truly invested, he won't let his ego dictate his response. He'll let his heart lead. He'll come back better, more intentional, more present. And if he doesn't, if he walks away, then that bruise revealed the truth. You were doing all the loving alone. And it's better to know that now than to spend your life proving your worth to someone who only loved you when his ego was being fed. And there's nothing more powerful, more magnetic, more unforgettable than a woman who can walk away from comfort to protect her peace, who can let go of what's hurting her just to find what truly sees her. Because that's not weakness, that's not ego, that's not revenge, that's self-respect, that divine femininity, that's grace under fire. And when a man sees that, when he feels that distance and realizes he created it, that bruise becomes a lesson, that ego becomes a mirror, and he either grows through it or fades because of it, but either way you win. Because you finally chose yourself over his comfort, your peace over his pride, your standards over his silence. And that decision, that silence, that subtle shift is what makes a man fall not just in love, but in awe. Because he realized you were never trying to hurt him, you were just tired of hurting yourself to keep his ego alive. When you disturb a man's comfort zone, that's when he starts chasing you with real fire in his heart, because a man who's too comfortable will never move with urgency, never act with intention, never truly see the value of what he has until that comfort is shaken. And for so long, women have been told to maintain the peace, keep the man satisfied, don't rock the boat. But the truth is, nothing grows in comfort, and a man will not evolve for a woman he doesn't fear losing. He will not rise for a woman who always says yes, who always forgives, who always explains herself. And if he knows you'll be there no matter how many times he pulls back, disappoints you, or disappears, then he has no reason to chase, no reason to step up, no reason to give more than the bare minimum, because his comfort zone is secured and unshaken. And here's what many women don't realize. The very moment you stop feeding his comfort zone, the second you disrupt the pattern he's grown used to, that's when you wake him up. Not because you yelled, not because you cried, but because you stop showing up the same way. You stop answering texts with the same energy. You stop making him the center of your universe. And suddenly he's uncomfortable. Suddenly he feels uneasy. And it doesn't take long for a man to recognize that something has shifted. And when that shift comes from silence, from stillness, from you pulling back without drama, it shakes him in a way that words never could. See, when a man thinks he's figured you out, when he believes he's mastered how to get your attention, how to pull you back in, how to emotionally manipulate the rhythm of the relationship, he relaxes. And not the kind of healthy relax, but the kind that turns into laziness, neglect, emotional distance. And that's why you must never become predictable to a man who hasn't yet proven consistency, loyalty, depth. Because once you become routine, he stops appreciating you. He stops working for your affection. And once that happens, the dynamic becomes lopsided, the relationship becomes a transaction, and you find yourself over-giving just to hold on to what you should have never been begging for. Now, the moment you become unavailable, the moment you become less reactive, the moment you stop proving your worth, that's when his comfort zone starts cracking. That's when he realizes he no longer has the same pull over your emotions, and he starts chasing not just because he misses you, but because he fears you've changed the game. And here's the secret. Men don't just chase women they love. They chase women who challenge them, who inspire them, who make them question themselves. And nothing creates that energy like pulling back your presence. Without warning, nothing shakes a man like your silence after his arrogance. Nothing humbles him like realizing you no longer look at him with those eyes full of hope and longing. He starts to feel the imbalance. He starts to feel the shift in power. And if he truly wants you, that's when the chase begins, not just with flowers or apologies, but with actions, with emotional maturity, with effort, with new behavior. Because he knows now that you're not sitting around waiting on potential. You're not caught up in fantasy. You're not building a future in your mind while he coasts through the present. And that awareness, that pressure, that challenge, it wakes something up in him, something primal, something passionate, something determined to win you back, not through charm, but through real growth. Disturbing his comfort zone doesn't mean playing games. It doesn't mean manipulating him or trying to punish him. It means breaking the pattern where he thinks your love will always be easy. Your forgiveness will always be automatic. Your time will always be available. Because once he learns that your energy has standards, once he understands that you won't keep loving someone who keeps hurting you, that's when he rises or retreats, and either way you get your answer. Because a man who wants to keep you will adjust, he will adapt, he will evolve. But a man who only wanted comfort will fold, will walk, will blame you for the distance he creates. There's a different kind of power in your silence, in your distance, in your peace, when it's no longer disrupted by his confusion. And when he feels that shift, when he senses that he's no longer the emotional center of your world, he begins to panic. Not because he's losing control over you, but because he's realizing he never truly had you. He just had access. And access without effort is a drug. It creates entitlement. And the only way to break that cycle is to become the woman who stops feeding comfort with consistency, who stops being emotionally available when he's emotionally absent, when he's chasing again, when he's reaching out more, asking deeper questions, making more time, showing more vulnerability. You'll know it wasn't your words that woke him up. It was your shift, your silence, your refusal to stay in a dynamic that didn't serve you anymore. And that's how you distinguish between a man who loves you and a man who loves convenience. Because a man who loves you will fight through discomfort to reach you. He will climb out of that comfort zone to meet you at your level. He will feel the sting of your absence and transform it into consistent presence. Men don't remember the women who made them feel comfortable. They remember the women who made them grow, who made them uncomfortable enough to look at themselves and say, I got to do better if I want her in my life. And when he chases you with that kind of intention, that kind of awareness, that kind of fire, it's because he knows you are no longer a soft landing for his chaos. You are no longer feeding his ego. You are no longer cushioning his emotional immaturity. You are forcing evolution. And if he doesn't rise to meet you, then he wasn't meant to hold you. You see, comfort zones are the enemy of progress. And for love to thrive, someone's got to be brave enough to disrupt the routine, to reset the standard, to say, this isn't enough for me anymore. And when that someone is you, you're not just walking in your power. You're redefining the relationship. You're giving him the opportunity to love you with purpose, not just with habit. And when he realizes he's no longer in control of your reactions, that you've reclaimed your emotional power, that his comfort no longer dictates your behavior, he'll either chase you with everything he's got, or he'll finally step aside so you can be pursued by someone who won't need a warning to treat you right.